Hello, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to Connect Africa, our bi-weekly session every Tuesday and every Thursday. Sorry about that.
Can hear.
Yeah, sorry. So we are here today, as we said on Tuesday, to talk about our topic for today is what's happening, why the U.S. banks are collapsing, and of course, as a Pan-African media platform, what is the impact on Africa's financial sector? What should Africa do? So the talking points for today are: we are going to talk about what's happening, and then what is causing really this failure or this collapsing of the banks in the United States. And then, of course, finally, our major point is that what are the pros and cons for Africa, for the Africa financial sector? Is it an advantage, disadvantage? So as usual, I am here joined by our Pan-African brother, Kwame Gonza. Welcome, Kwame.
Thank you so much, Mahlet. Thank you so much for having me. And thanks to our audience. As usual, we greet you from all over the continent and outside the continent. I will bring you greetings from Connect Africa. As Mahlet has rightly mentioned, we want to look at the certain events that are going on across the globe. And as usual, Connect Africa is where we have been discussing these things extensively. The events, whether you are talking about the war in Ukraine, whether you are talking about the things happening in the South China Sea, whether you are talking about the war in, the war in Sudan, all these things we have been bringing them to you. The United States and its diplomats who have been visiting the African continent. The Russian foreign minister, Russia has been coming also to Africa. India has been coming to Africa. So we have been wrapping all these and discussing them to see how do they affect the African continent. So this is no different even today. So we are coming to look at what Mahlet has introduced, that the United States has been having issues with its banks, which have been facing a lot of turmoil. Some of them, they are saying they have been collapsing. The United States Federal Reserve has been taking over some of the banks. So what effect do these have on the African continent and the African people? So, and what should be the response of the African people? So this is what we have come to discuss today and analyze in depth, so that you can be also in a position to prepare yourself as an African and respond to such events, happening across the globe. So, with that being said, I want to thank you for being part of Connect Africa and always tuning in to this channel. Invite other people to subscribe to the channel, invite other people to like the channel, share the channel, and comment it down in the section. Like we said, we are also engaged in other activities like pushing on the front, not only analyzing. So Mahlet, please forgive me for saying too much, but I had to thank our, viewers for the patronage. Thank you so much.
Definitely. No, that was really very good. I'm glad that you brought it. Our viewers are here. And yeah, please, I just want to emphasize that click that like button and then share it with your friends, because it's information. Information is power. So as we empower ourselves, also we need to empower our African brothers and sisters and even others. That's the main thing. So for us, we have done similar topics about IMF and then the de-dollarization in the United States. So we will put the link there because these are linked topics. So today we are going to talk about the collapsing of the American banks in the United States. Actually, also in the whole Western Hemisphere, also some banks are collapsing in Western Europe as well. But our focus for today will be in the US. So, Kwame, what is Yeah, but before we go to the first question, there's this video that we got from First Post I would like to share, and then I'm going to pose our first question for today to Kwame. Just give me a second. Yeah. Let's
Our
hear
next
it.
story is about the US banking crisis. It seems to be spreading. Yesterday, regional banks in America suffered more losses. Their stocks were in the red. They plunged by more than 10%. Investors are pulling out their money. They fear that more banks are on the brink of collapse. Two of them are in the headlines. PacWest and Western Alliance. They're both mid-sized banks. Both are said to be in trouble, and both are exploring their options, including a potential sale. This week began with the sale of First Republic. The bank was in distress. It was sold to JP Morgan. Now it appears that PacWest and Western Alliance could be headed in the same direction. PacWest is in particularly bad shape. Yesterday, its shares dropped by more than 50%, and a 50% drop is a clear red flag. This year has been bad for the bank. In all, it has lost more than 85% of its stock value, which means losses for investors, millions of dollars in losses, and the bleeding is still on. So PacWest is being forced to consider radical moves. The bank issued a statement, I'm quoting from it. Recently, the company has been approached by several potential partners and investors. Discussions are ongoing. The company will continue to evaluate all options to maximize shareholder value. What does this mean? It means that all options are on the table. That's what the bank is saying. It could sell its assets. It could bring in an investor. It could even consider an all-out sale. And these are extreme measures, and they tell you how big the crisis is. In fact, all the banks that are in trouble face the same problem. The problem of liquidity is a cash crunch. They don't have money. Where did the money go? Ask the US Central Bank. They call it the Federal Reserve. In recent months, the Fed has hiked interest rates, and that hike has punched a hole in the books of American banks. How did that happen? Well, these banks held many government bonds. With the rate hikes, the value of those bonds has declined. So now the banks are in trouble. And the Fed is still hiking interest rates. Yesterday, it announced another hike, the 10th one since March 2022. You know what this means for American banks? It means more pain. But the Fed chairman is not worried. He claims the US banking system is resilient.
Let me comment briefly on recent developments in the banking sector. Conditions in that sector have broadly improved since early March, and the US banking system is sound and resilient. We will continue to monitor conditions in the sector. We're committed to learning the right lessons from this episode, and will work to prevent events like these from happening again.
The banking system is sound and resilient, he says. If that's the case, then why are banks collapsing?
Yeah, an interesting insight and question to raise, definitely. There are a lot of things that comes to my mind from what we have discussed before when you were giving us that analysis when we do the de-dollarization in America. But now, yeah, let's just go to the point. So what is causing this collapse of the United States banks? What's happening?
Thank you very much, Mahlet. And it is indeed important that Palkishama from First Post has given us a little bit of background from what we are seeing. A lot of banks have been facing a lot of problems, and majorly what they are focusing on is the micro level. And these are economic terms, of course, but I will try to simplify it for our viewers to be able to understand it. When we are talking about micro level, it means the economic conditions happening within a particular country. Banks, starting with, for example, Silicon Valley Bank, when it started and it collapsed, immediately there was a sense that this is going to be a ripple effect. This is going to, to move on to other banks. And indeed, it did that after banks like Silicon Valley Bank collapsed and they were taken over. Immediately another bank followed. Silicon Valley Bank, if you look at it, it is a bank which has been around for a number of years. I think for around it should be around 49 years, 39 years, around 39 years.
Mhm.
And you could say that it is a bank which has been around for some time, and so it is expected to be strong enough. It is expected to have enough capital, but it did not have enough capital for certain, of course, reasons. Like I've mentioned, they are majorly mentioning micro issues, microeconomic issues within the country. But as we look ahead, as we go ahead, we will examine, was it really microeconomic issues? Is it issues to do with the mismanagement, within the bank, and mismanagement with the Federal Reserve, as we have heard the chairman of the Federal Reserve saying that the Federal Reserve, the United States Federal Reserve, also will take some responsibility. So we want to see, is it only the microeconomic issues that are affecting these banks, that they are falling? And of course, on top of that, we will see how it is going to affect our African continent also, and what steps should we be taking. So the first bank to fail was Silicon Valley Bank. Second, then we had the collapse of Signature Bank. That is the second bank which it followed. Also, Signature Bank also has been around for some time. I think it was established in 2001. Silicon Valley Bank was established, I think, in 1884. Signature Bank, it was established in 2001, so it has been around for a few years, more than 20 years. And that was the second bank to fail, Signature Bank. Now, after Signature Bank, there was a lot of uproar within the banking system in the United States. And people started jumping up and down. People started withdrawing their monies from the bank. In an event which they normally call the bank run. Bank run is a situation where people run to withdraw their money from the banks after there is a financial scare within the financial system. And actually, because banks don't always have enough money to give back to all the customers who deposit the money, because this money is normally out there with businesses operating. When such a thing happens, you find that it leads to the collapse of a bank, that the bank in turn, it does not have money if people do a bank run on it because of this financial scare. So that is why it is very important. For example, the major banks, the leading banks, the biggest banks like JP Morgan, for example, came out to buy First Republic because it was the third bank to fail. First Republic came out to buy JP Morgan. Why? And even the CEO, Jamie Dimon, of the CEO of JP Morgan, had to come out and try to strengthen through his talk. He gave a talk and said that the banking system is robust, or this is just temporary. So they are trying to instill confidence in the people so that people would not go to the banks to withdraw their money. So First Republic Bank also failed, and JP Morgan came to buy it. But before that, we had also the collapse of Credit Suisse in Switzerland. This is a very, very old bank that has been around for a very, very long time. It is a bank which was founded in 1856, and it has been around also for 166 years. So this is a very, very old bank. And of course, it has had numerous problems. In some cases, it has been implicated in money laundering. And in some cases, it has stood. So these are the banks, of course, when you are talking about illicit financial outflows, which have been helping, in certain cases, people to move illegal money. But at the same time, because they control, they have an oversized importance on nations. For example, you see that countries to a certain level, do not feel like they don't have power to control these banks. These banks sometimes they can make the rules. They can make their own rules. Like if you talk about Wall Street, you talk about, for example, JP Morgan, it has power even to make rules, like financial rules in a country like the United States. So you find that if they have certain CEOs who who are rogue, who are only minded about making profit, these CEOs can allow these banks to behave in certain ways that they engage in money laundering. We have heard about Africa's issue with illicit financial outflow with the UN report which came out in 2000, I think it was 2021. The report said that Africa is losing more than $90 billion every year, to illicit financial outflow. So that means these majority of these banks in Africa, especially which are foreign owned, because the financial sector in Africa is majorly owned by foreign banks. So you see that these banks are participating in that money laundering. So this is the behavior that when there's a shock or there's a tightening of rules in certain areas of the world, these banks are likely to influence, they are likely to be influenced by these shocks, and they are not likely to fare very well. And this is what we are seeing, that even Credit Suisse in the past has been implicated in money laundering issues. And then also it has been financed by the Saudis, the House of Saudi Arabia, the government there. But this time when it was facing many problems, the Saudis came out and said that they will not they are not going to inject any more money in that bank. And this immediately led to the stocks, its stocks going down, and then to collapse. And they sold it also to another bank, I think, which is called the UBA in Switzerland. They sold it to that bank. So that is what we are seeing in that area. So when you asked what is the major cause of this this collapse of these banks, and of course, like I've mentioned, they said that these banks have collapsed because of internal controls, because of indiscipline of the bank managers. There was indiscipline within the banks themselves, that they bought bonds, and then the Fed, also the Federal Reserve, for example, in the United States, has hiked the interest rates, and so these banks lost access to money. So, but from our analysis as Africans, and from a geopolitical standpoint, we want to look at it from a different point of view. We don't want to follow what the Western media is saying and what is parroting. But from our analysis, what are we seeing? And this is what we have come to show you today here as Connecting Africa, and how, of course, it affects the African continent. What should be the position that we are taking? We should take. We think that these banks are collapsing. In addition to the indiscipline inside, of course, which is the micro level, there's also the aspect of macro. When we are talking about macroeconomic issues, then we are talking about the world economy, the international economy, the economic activities, any activities that affect the global economy in certain areas. So that's what macro is about. Micro is within nations, within particular nations. Macro is on the global scale, the global economy. It has to do with the global economy. So we think that the issue of the dollarization, and it is very good that Mahlet, you spoke about it, because you immediately saw it, that these banks, it is likely that the de-dollarization issue is also affecting them. So this de-dollarization actually is a major issue which has come to affect these banks. The dollarization, why? As we are seeing nations rejecting the United States dollar, this United States dollar is bound to go back, because people now are not using the United States dollars. So these dollars, if nations are not using them, then that means the Federal Reserve cannot print more dollars. And these dollars, which are already in the global economy, they will be transferred back to the United States. So these dollars, when they are transferred back in the United States, that means in the United States economy, there is a lot of money inside, a lot of paper, dollars. This pushes the inflation upwards in the United States. So this is what we have been seeing the Federal Reserve fighting against. The Federal Reserve has been fighting against the effects of de-dollarization. That is why it is hiking up the interest rates while removing the dollars which are coming back home from the system. And so it is not in a position to print more dollars like how it did in 2008. Because in 2008, there was no major scare. There was no a major scare of de-dollarization. Like we have seen Saudi Arabia and China discussing about, transacting business in the yuan. We have seen Brazil and China discussing. We have seen, India and Russia, they are doing business in, in Indian rupee and yuan to some extent. So these are all effects that are happening and affecting on a macro level. But this is not being said. Why? Like we have said before, that the dollarization issue, the dollarization in the United States is not being spoken about because it will cause so much panic within the country that people will lose, will cause so much panic. People will lose trust in the United States dollar, and they will start sending, people will start actually rejecting the dollar and then putting their money in gold. And of course, people have started doing that. We have seen the price of gold go up since the COVID period, even since last year when stocks went down and company stocks went down, the currency, the dollar also, it went down to a certain level because the Federal Reserve was trying to fight back during that period, and gold went down. But what we are seeing right now, again, is that gold now has started going up. Why has gold started going up? The price of gold started going up because people are buying the gold. And why are people buying gold? Is because numerous nations, many nations, including nations in Africa, are rejecting the dollar. And the Federal Reserve now is caught within, is in a trap. Is in a trap that it is trying to fight and remove these dollars from the system. And so it is not allowed to print more money like how it did in 2008 and 2009 and 2010 during that, bank crisis that happened during that period, that financial crisis, which claimed, corporations, investment institutions like Bear Stearns, for example, and Lehman Brothers, which were claimed during that period. They just printed money to give the rest to the rest of the banks which were surviving. So this time they are not doing that because of the pressure, the external pressure, because of the macroeconomic issues that are happening on the global stage. So to go further, to examine again why the collapse, we are seeing also that the Chinese economy has become the biggest economy. If you are looking at purchasing power, the Chinese economy right now is the biggest economy in the world and is the manufacturing hub of the world. So there is a considerable level of trust within the Chinese economy right now. There's a considerable level of trust because China is producing more than it is consuming. And the United States for itself is consuming more than it is producing. It is not producing enough. So this is one of the situations that we are seeing. China, when you are talking about purchasing power, its economy right now is $31.6 trillion. And the US is $23.1 trillion. So in essence, the Chinese economy is way bigger than the US economy right now. China is the biggest economy in the world right now, and is bigger than the Chinese economy is bigger than the US economy by around 36.8%, by $8.5 trillion. and it is still getting better. So that's why you see the United States coming up against China, to fight against China, just like how it did fight against Japan. When Japan, at a certain level in the 1970s and 80s, Japan became the second biggest economy in the 70s and the 60s. So the United States came out to fight against Japan and crush Japan's economy, because the United States didn't want to be overtaken. And so this is what we are also seeing with China. But only this time, that China is a much more formidable challenger to the United States' status as a leading economy in the world. So these are all effects. China has a much bigger population. China is not Japan. China has a bigger market, and the economy has grown hugely, and it has a very competent political system. So these are all reasons why we are seeing the collapse of the United States banking system. This is a ripple effect that is coming from all these things that are happening. You've seen that in the past, they have claimed that China is the one whose economy is going to collapse. China is having problems. China is having problems with the housing market. But China has been able to weather through all these problems. And instead, we are seeing these issues, they are in the United States. So the other thing which we are seeing is the heavy-handed activities of the United States, the neo-colonial activities of, the heavy-handed neo-colonial activities of the United States and the Western world. In one of his tweets, Elon Musk mentioned that the United States' policy has been very heavy-handed, and it has been making countries want to ditch the dollar. That is Elon Musk, one of the richest people, of course, the second richest man, who has been, the richest person in the world for a couple of times. He said that the US policy, and I quote him, the US policy has been too heavy-handed, making countries want to ditch the dollar. This is Elon Musk. And then we have Janet Yellen, the Secretary of Treasury. She has also mentioned in her interview on CNN that there is a risk when we use financial sanctions that are linked to the role of the dollar, that over time it could undermine the hegemony of the dollar. It could undermine the hegemony of the dollar. This is Janet Yellen when she was giving her interview to CNN, to Fareed Zakaria. So this is very important to note, that these are all issues that are affecting the dollar. These are all issues which affect the dollar, and then also affect the banking system. So the collapse of the banking system is no accident. Is no accident. What we are seeing is not an accident. And then if you look at the screen, you can see the sources of the information. If you want, you can type in and check it out for yourself. And then we have the issue of the arrogance, the biting arrogance of the United States, that they have been also biting the same hand which is feeding them. The United States dollar has been powerful because countries have trusted the dollar during the creation, the Bretton Woods Conference, that the United States dollar was given the power as the reserve currency of the world. But the United States has instead been using this currency to impose sanctions, to impose its colonialism on countries. And this has not gone down very well. We have the Ukraine war on the other side also. That is another issue. The sanctions on Russia, actually, these have also accelerated this process. They wanted to hurt the Russian economy, and they imposed these sanctions on Russia. They seized around $300 billion of the Russian economy. So when they seized $300 billion of the Russian economy, all the other countries, they started dumping the dollar. They rejected the dollar. And so that is why we have seen the acceleration in the rejection of the dollar by the various countries, because the other countries felt that no, what if this happens to us? What if this happens to us and they seize our reserves? So that is, this effect also is playing a part to the collapse of the United States banks, which we are seeing. So the sanctions actually now, which have been put on Russia, they are backfiring, because now Russia is not using dollars. As we have seen that Russia now is, even in its trade with India, is trying to demand that India also should pay yuan for Russian oil, because they have accumulated a lot of Indian rupee and they don't have what to use it for. So they have been transferring their currency out of the consumption of the dollar. The whole of the Russian economy now, they don't want to use dollars. So this is ineffective. So these sanctions now, they are backfiring. They wanted to destroy Russia's economy. Now it's the United States and Western economies that are being destroyed. They are paying the price. And then, of course, we have the movement of assets to gold. People are buying gold. We have already spoken about this. From the de-dollarization to the movement of money, people, they are taking the dollars and buying. They are buying gold. They have been taking out their money from the banks to go and buy gold so that they can keep gold, because gold is safe. Because they are seeing what is happening on the international scale. So majority of these issues that we are seeing are macroeconomic from our point of view. So with that being said, Mahlet, let me stop there from the question of why the United States dollar and also the banks, majorly the banks which we are discussing today, the question of why these banks have been collapsing. Everything is attached to the dollar, and how they have been treating the dollar on the international stage, and how they have been behaving, how they have been pushing, of course, their colonialism across the globe. And countries now are responding, and this is what we are seeing as an effect, the collapse of these banks.
Thank you very much, Kwame. Really, you gave us a background, and then also you gave us a very good, insightful that why these banks are collapsing. Not what we get as a face value on mainstream media, but really what's happening. What is the story behind? Because there's always that story that they don't give you, because obviously they don't want to show that, tell their people their bank is collapsing, as they don't tell them that the de-dollarization is happening actually globally. Now, it brings us to our last question, and of course the main reason why we bring such global topics to this platform, because as we repeatedly say, what's happening in the world concerns Africa, because we are part of the planet, part of the globe, and Africa always should look at those things. We cannot just sit aside and be corner ourselves and let it happen. As it happens, either we need to take a lesson or we prepare. There are a lot of things to be done. Hopefully our policy makers, whether it's in the African Union or in all this individual member state, will hear and do something. We keep on sending the videos, that what we do, but yeah, so that main question is that how is this meaning collapsing of the Western banks, and mainly the US, is going to impact Africa? Because our transaction, most of us, I think all of us, are still transacting the import and export transactions through the US banks or the main major banks in Europe, through dollar or euro. So how is it going to affect Africa? Some analysts say from Africa that there are challenges and opportunities. So if there is an opportunity, what is that small pocket of opportunity for Africa? Can we do it? Can Africa do now, be firm and provide that financial need for African individuals, businesses who want to take loan? What's going to happen to Mother Africa? Yeah, that's all I am interested to know, and I'm sure our viewers. Back to you, Kwame.
Thank you very much, Mahlet. Absolutely. Actually, if you have any question and you want to interject while I'm responding to your question, you are welcome. We can pause a little bit and have any discussion on a particular point that you may have in mind that that may run away before I finish. I wanted to mention, before I come to what Africa's response, what we think Africa's response should be, I wanted to also to point out a little bit on what the response of the Western world has been to this collapse of banks. I know we have touched it a little bit, but I wanted also to mention it, that what has really been their response. Their response has majorly been denial. When you look at the media, when you look at CNN, when you look at BBC, when you look at all these their media houses, the response has majorly been denial and saying, like we have mentioned, they have mentioned that it is micro issues, it is management issues within the economy. They don't want to mention that we started a war on Russia and the things are backfiring on us. They don't want to mention that. They don't want to mention that Russia is defeating us. Russia has overplayed us, because Russia has been for a long time buying a lot of gold to back up its economy. Right now, the Russian currency is being backed up by gold as we speak. And the dollar is not being backed up by
Kwame,
gold.
sorry, now that you gave me the liberty, don't forget your point. I don't want to disturb the flow, but I just read today that actually Zimbabwe already started to use gold as a currency.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. Zimbabwe actually started a few months ago. I think as early as last year, plans, that is when they started coming up, Zimbabwe's plans of using, because it has also been facing a lot of sanctions from the United States. So it looks like if you now have sanctions from the United States, your only answer, go to gold. Because Russia went to gold, Zimbabwe has gone to gold, and other countries, of course, like BRICS, they are looking now around to make their own currencies, and some of them are saying their currencies should be backed by, of course, by gold. And the effect definitely will be the collapse of the Western world and their banks. It will be the collapse of their banks, and that is what we are seeing, because countries are adopting the use of gold. So their response has majorly been denial that it is not happening. It is not happening. Our economy is strong, as you have heard. Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, has said that the bank, the economy is strong. We have had Jimmy Dimon, the CEO of Morgan, JP Morgan, saying that the economy is strong. This effect is temporary, is not anything. But we have seen that it has been actually multiplying, and more banks are failing, as we are seeing, as Palkishama also mentioned. So the hiding place has now become denial, that we are still strong. Of course, at least they are strong militarily. Someone can say they are still strong militarily. Of course, they are strong. But why are they doing this? They are doing this because this is a major issue. The issue of countries dumping the dollar is a major issue. Remember what happened to Libya and what happened to Iraq. Why did it happen? It's because these countries were weak countries which mentioned the dumping of the dollar. And what happened? They immediately went and destroyed Libya. They immediately went and destroyed Iraq, because Saddam was saying that he wants to start selling his oil in only euros. He doesn't want to send the oil, Iraqi oil, in dollars. He wants to sell it in euros. They went and bombed Saddam and claimed he was supporting terrorists. And he was not supporting any terrorists. He didn't have any connection to the terrorists who bombed the World Trade Center in 2001. Gaddafi is the same situation, because Gaddafi was trying to make up a currency that will lead to the destruction of the dollar, a currency, an African currency, a gold dinar. And this information is out there for everyone, to get. So today, what is happening is that they have to hide in this denial as if they have never protected the dollar to this extent. So when they hide in this denial, then we will see that effect with the collapse that is happening internally. Why? Because they have never faced a challenge like this before. They have never faced a challenge like what you see, a formidable challenger like China. Because the person who's leading now that de-dollarization process is China. China is so strong that it is spending $400 billion a year on its military. So it's not a weak country like Iraq or Libya, which you can just go in and bomb. It is de-dollarizing, and it is helping other countries to de-dollarize, to throw off the colonial yoke which the United States has been imposing. And so what we are seeing in the United States banking system, that is the effect of the dollarization process that's being led by China. And let us not take it lightly. This is a very serious issue. It's a very serious issue, and that is why they are not talking about it. That is why you see in the United States, they are not talking about it, that the dollarization is the one which is causing the collapse of our financial system. They will not say it because they know that all of a sudden the whole world will realize that, yes, this issue is connected to what happened in Libya, the destruction of Libya, the bombing of Libya by NATO, the bombing of Libya by the United States, of course, because it's the one which led the bombing of Saddam, even in Iraq, and bombing and destruction of Iraq. It was because of the currency. But now, a major power is the one which is leading this crusade, and numerous countries now have jumped on board. You have had, Saudi Arabia turning to BRICS. You have had Brazil mentioning that we are going to transact without the dollar. We will do business with China. You have had countries like Argentina, they want to join BRICS. So it is almost like a crusade. You have had, Iraq and you have had Iran and Saudi Arabia coming back together. Of course, we have mentioned Russia already. We have mentioned India, even a major ally of the United States. So this is creating pressure on the United States, a lot of pressure. So that is why we are seeing this collapse in the bank. So the response has been denial and pushing further rhetoric of China as the greatest enemy, but they are not telling you why they are saying all that. And then, so what should the response of we as Africans? I think as Africans, it is time for us to assert ourselves also. We have mentioned on numerous cases that there's a changing world order that is happening at all levels of world systems, whether economical and politically. That is why you see that countries now are applying even to join BRICS. Why? Because these countries have realized that there's a changing world order that is happening. Systems are changing. So when systems are changing, then countries start changing their allegiance. So that is why you see that countries now, more of them are asserting themselves, and they want to join BRICS. Many of them, they want to do business with China. Of course, we'll come and do a business. We'll come and do a program here with Mahlet on China, on an extensive program on China. Why all countries are going to China right now? It's because of that. They have realized that there's a changing world order and systems are being changed, the economic and political. So Africa also, is time for us to realize that these things are changing, and we are global citizens. We cannot sit on the sidelines as these things are happening. So we have also, from a strategic point of view, to start making our case, coming together and talking to each other, because it is these same banks which are collapsing that have been used to scam Africa for a very long time. We've spoken about the illicit financial outflow. It's these same multinational banks which are collapsing that have been used to launder Africa's money. We've spoken about the illicit financial outflow out of Africa, more than $90 billion. That is what the UN said annually. But Pan-Africanists have said that the money that has been flowing out of Africa is more than that. It's more than $200 billion every year. And who is taking it? It's these banks, these major banks like Standard Chartered, Barclays Bank, which is which renamed itself, and the majority of other banks is Stanbic Bank, because these are not African banks. They are here because they have a grip on Africa's financial sector, and they are exploiting the continent. They are helping these corporations to steal Africa's money and the resources. So it is time for Africa to realize that this is the game. This is the time for Africans also to come together and say we have to create our own financial systems, and also ally with partners who have our interests as heart as Africans. We have our own interests. So it is time for Africa also to push forward and start avoiding the IMF. The IMF loans, we have seen countries like Tunisia, for example, avoiding confronting the UN. I mean, confronting the IMF. It is time for us as Africans to band together and avoid these IMF loans. Tunisia has rejected the IMF loans because of the conditionalities. In the past, Egypt also has been on the same line, contending with the IMF because of the conditions that the IMF has been, attaching to these loans. They are colonial conditions. They are not just conditions, but they are conditions for keeping you as a colony of the United States. So we think that the African heads of state and the political class have to live within their means. They have to live within the means of their citizens. We have seen a lot of wasting in majority of the African countries, a lot of wasting of resources. 300 MPs, 400 MPs. Countries have 100 ministers. A small country has 100 ministers, taking huge salaries. So within we, the African, and this is the responsibility of the African civil society, we as Africans, within we, the African civil society, we have to start a movement and make it clear that we are not going to take any more of this nonsense of wasting Africa's money. Because imagine if Africa brought together all its GDP, which is more than $3.5 trillion. $3.5 trillion, we will be the fifth largest economy in the world, bigger than the economy of the UK, bigger than the economy of India. That is Africa. But our money is being wasted. Africa's money is being wasted on frivolous expenditures. And this is the problem. So when these IMF and the United States print their money, they bring it to Africa, which is fake money and is economic slavery. They take our resources for free, and we just sit there and we just look. Our politicians, they have it smooth because they have been given these loans. They just waste all that money. They live well. They get good pays and with their families. And this is what we have to change. There's numerous things you can do as an African. There's numerous things. You can write letters. You have MPs. You have ministers. These people are reachable. You have social media. Write about these things and talk about them and say, we will not allow IMF loans anymore. We are tired of IMF loans. Call to your radio stations and mention it. These are things that can be done. Call your TV stations and mention it, that we are tired of IMF loans. If there is enough voices, a big number of voices on the African continent saying that we do not need the IMF loans anymore. These politicians and MPs you are seeing, the heads of state and the ministers you are seeing, these are normal human beings like you. They are not special people. If there's enough voices out there that are mentioning these things, that we don't need the IMF loans anymore, we will overcome this problem. So it is time for African civil society also to station itself in that position so that we can break the economic slavery that is happening to us as African people. Because when these people take loans, of course, we are the ones who suffer, the African citizens. And we don't benefit anything from it. And we have seen the IMF coming back aggressively. And it uses these banks which you are seeing that are collapsing. So if they collapse, it is an advantage for us. It is an advantage for Africa that the yoke of economic slavery, financial slavery, is being broken. So we just have now to play our part as Africans on our continent. So it is not time for us to put our hands, to fold our hands and despair and wait for another superpower to come and enslave us. Of course, we have had other people talking about China, that China could rise and enslave us also. Yes, it would only be able to enslave us. China would be able to enslave us if we continue to sit down and leave the people who are in the rulership of the continent to continue to do what they want. But we have all to be involved. We have to be involved, all of us. We have to confront our heads of state so that they move in the direction of African unity, unifying Africa on all fronts, like we have mentioned, unifying Africa's economy, unifying the currency, unifying the foreign policy of Africa, unifying the military strength of Africa. Because without the military strength, there's no economy which you can protect. We cannot protect the 3.5 billion, or trillion dollar, the 3.5 trillion dollar economy which we have in Africa. And that economy can only be effective in Africa, the 3.5 trillion, if we aggregate it together and work together. So we have to confront our heads of state in the African continent to move in that direction of unifying the African economy, unifying the African central banks into one central bank, unifying the currency. I know PLO Lumumba has spoken about this issue of currency, how we should have an Afro, a currency called an Afro, some sort of like that, unifying our foreign policy so that we are respected on the international stage, unifying our military so that we can take care of our own security issues on the African continent. We will not be manipulated by the United States. We will not be manipulated by France or Germany, that they are coming here, blackmailing us, that they are coming here to help Africa, keep off the Islamist militants. Why? Is because we have unified. So when we unify, they don't have a chance to do that. So projects like the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, they mean nothing. I know that they are working on the African, and the shout out and thanks to the people who are working on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. But the Africa Continental Free Trade Area means nothing if Africa does not have a unified central bank. If Africa's economy is not unified and aggregated together to work together, these countries are not pulled together to work together. And these countries can only work together if there's a political body that is holding them together. If there is a single currency that is holding them together. If there is a single foreign policy that is protecting Africa's economy from the external predators. But now we have predators all over the continent: Germany, Britain, France. Everyone comes to the continent, India, China. Everyone comes to the continent and does whatever they want. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area cannot solve those problems. The only solution that can solve these problems is the unifying of Africa's direction, politically, economically, and in the foreign policy issue and militarily. This is what can take care of these issues. So the issue of rationalization that has been happening on the African continent, about 2,000 languages, we cannot unite because we have done this, we have done this. That kind of rationalization, that we have too many languages, we cannot unite on the African continent, has to be rejected outright. Because in unifying Africa, we are not looking to furnish our languages or to improve our languages in any way. That is not what we are looking for. In unifying Africa, we are looking for security. That is what a united Africa is going to, accomplish for us. In unifying Africa, we are looking for an improved healthcare system. That is what we are looking for. We are not looking to speak more languages. In unifying Africa, we are looking for improved schools, infrastructure, high-speed trains. We are looking for high-value manufacturing, like aircraft manufacturing of vehicles, electric cars, not assembling like what is happening today. This is what we are looking for. We are looking to improve all the lives of the Africans. We are not looking to speak our 1,000 languages or to improve them or even to abolish them. What we are looking for is to improve our lives. These languages actually, in fact, the cultures of Africa would rather be more protected if we are unified. So we are looking for security. We are looking for rapid development as an African continent. And we cannot achieve this if we don't unify on the political level, economic level, policy and military level. We cannot bring peace. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area means nothing if there is no security, if there is no a single military on the African continent, because the external powers will continue to come inside and destabilize. They don't want peace here. The foreign powers do not want peace, because without peace in Africa, that is the chance which they use for the exploitation of the African people. So the methods we use to achieve the idea of African unity, those are the methods which organizations like Connect Africa are working on, organizations like PLO Lumumba Foundation, which we are working with, of course, are working on, organizations like the Kwame Nkrumah Ideological Institute, organizations like the Uhuru Movement in the United States of Chairman Omali Yashitela, organizations like the All Africa People Revolutionary Party, organizations like the Africa Continental Unity Party. These are the organizations you have to go out there and support. Support these organizations at every turn, Look for these people who are fighting for the cause of Africa and support them. So we invite you today, come and join us here at Connect Africa. Join other organizations, support the channel, because we are here to do the work. We are not only here to analyze these issues and make people happy and look for likes and excite people. That is not what we are here to do. We are here to build the new Africa which we want and we desire and we deserve as African people. Thank you very much, Mahlet.
Thank you very much, Kwame. Really, that was really, really interesting, very motivational. I really, really hope that our people hear this and do some action. I will try to share some of the views, the comments here in the chat section. Some of, most of them share what you said. Brother Pigbin Odumiwengu is here with us. Thank you. Greetings, brother. Africa Development Bank depend on the loans from the West to fund it, almost 40%, it says. He said, let's see those which are questions, or perhaps I might need your reflection. How do we remove, Brother Pigbin is talking about, unfortunately, Kenya is receiving, I was reading here, actually, in the past few days, there was someone from Kenya, an official, who was analyzing, how Kenya is indebted for the next generation because of the loans that it's taking. Unfortunately, Kenya is receiving a new $1 billion IMF loans by 26 this month, and already it is hurting us with high taxation. And then he also further comments or asks, how do we remove those in power, because they are the ones responsible? Remember, they are puppets of the West, and as Thomas Sankara said, he who feeds you control you. That's one, maybe if you want to reflect. They agree that IMF should be banned. Despite, this is CNS, despite being the most sanctioned country in the world, Russia's economy grew faster than economies of the collective West. We can learn a lot from this as a continent. Yeah, they don't bring this on to the TV or whatever media. So people, they just think that, oh, Russia is sanctioned and Russia is losing. No, it's actually the contrary is happening. So that's one of the things that we try to bring the information. That's what the mainstream will not bring to your TV screen. Russia has shown that sanctions do not work for countries that are self-sufficient. Of course, yeah, that's also important. Yeah, CNDS also commented, they always find, meaning the West, someone to blame. Like now they say Putin's inflation, Putin's war of choice, China stole our jobs, not taking responsibility, whatsoever for their action. And Sinovia Indigo said, welcome, Sinovia. Everyone welcome. Yeah, thank you really for your engagement. That's why it's important we have our own informative information, our own narrative, because the West will never tell the whole truth. Yeah, so probably on what Pigben shared, that Kenya taking a new loan. Yeah, if you have some words, you may reflect on that comment.
Yeah, so I heard him. Thank you, my brother Pigeon, for being around. Is very helpful. It's very important. Yeah, it's important that you encourage all the other people to to join the channel so that we can start pushing forward. I know that is part of the answer to the question, the second question which was asked. I don't know whether it was the same person who asked about what we should do to remove the people in power. So that answers one of the issue of you coming here and contributing to Connect Africa and putting your hand out there and being a contributor, watching and sharing, enriching yourself. And then we talking to each other, because everything starts with speaking to each other. So let me just continue with the second question before I come back to the first question. We have to sit down and talk to each other. We have to understand that we are not living in normal times as Africans. That has to be clear in our minds. So if we understand that we are not living in normal times, then our actions have to be different as a people. And then those actions have to be towards supporting anyone or putting our hands together with anyone who is fighting for the unification of Africa, for the good of Africa. That is in the media, in action, in every support. And like we have mentioned here, we have petitions which are running, and those petitions have been supported by the PLO Lumumba Foundation. PLO Lumumba himself, I spoke to him and he supported these petitions. And he said, I will sign. And if you go and sign those petitions, you will see PLO Lumumba's signature. If you look at the people who have signed these petitions. So this is very important. This is one of the ways in which we can contribute. We have seen people like the Uhuru movement, Chairman Omari Yashitela. The FBI is hunting for him. He's been torturing him. He's been torturing the whole movement. Why? Because the African people in the United States are organizing themselves. So they are, they are trying to paint them black, that they are working for Russia, simply because they are organizing the people, the black people in the United States. So we have to support such initiatives. They have a donation website. Go out there and support them. So these are the works. So we can work together. We can talk to each other and find a solution. So the solution, because the problem is very complicated, then the solution cannot be a one-shot solution. The solution has to come when we sit down together. You bring an idea, I bring an idea, and I say, let us examine history. How did China achieve what it has achieved? How did it throw off colonialism? Because China also was colonized. The United States was there, Britain was there, all these countries, they went there and bullied China and destroyed it and divided it. But how did China throw off? So we examine the history, we share ideas. How did we throw off colonialism, for example, in the 1945? Yet our people did not have money, did not have anything. And yet today we have a lot of money, we have a lot of resources, we have communication. How did our people in Haiti destroy slavery in 1791 up to, starting from 1791 up to 1804? They did not have money. They did not have anything. They were just slaves. How did they do it? So we examine all these histories. There's no one single shot. That is why that is what I said. So everything is about confronting the power, because it is those ones who have power that are misusing it to oppress us. So when we sit down and we dialogue, then we get solutions. Those solutions, we go out there and start testing them on the ground. Like we said, we have petitions. Petitions is just one of the ways that we are petitioning them. We are now asking for dialogue. We are asking them for dialogue. Come and talk to us. We have demands. If they refuse, then we have a right to take it to the next level. But we, as Connect Africa and other organizations, we have already started that journey. That is why we are inviting majority of you to come and support. So this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning, but we have to be consistent. This liberation process takes time. It takes more than 10 years. That is the time it normally takes. 10 to 15 years of consistent work. It is not a single day, 1 month, 1 year job. So we cannot strategize on how to take power and unify Africa in 1 year and say we are going to do it. No, we have to keep discussing. We have to keep studying, the movements that have succeeded. And then with that, we'll be able to overcome the problem. So that is the answer to the second question. But it can be done. One thing that has to be in your mind is that it can be done. This thing can be done. If the people in the past have done it before and they have confronted mighty powers like France and Britain, who were the biggest powers, without anything, people like Nkrumah, they didn't have anything. They just organized people and they spoke to the people and they were able to move. Our people did not have much. Today we have much more. We have much more communication. So if they ask you, share what this channel is broadcasting, is not much. That is a contribution. That is a major contribution. Absolute contribution. If they say press the like button so that the broadcast can be suggested to many people, the algorithm on YouTube can suggest the broadcast to many people so that the people can be able to understand what is supposed to be done, then that is not much to ask for. That is the contribution that you are making for the start. And then if you want to do more, then God bless you. So to go to the first question, Mahlet, can you remind me on the first question? He spoke about the first question. Yeah, he spoke about the issue of Kenya. I've remembered it. Kenya, you see, majority of the African countries are taking the loans. Even Ghana is taking, of course, Egypt also, even though it had first refused the loans. We have seen, of course, Tunisia refusing and rejecting the loan because it has too many conditionalities.
Just to add on this, Ethiopia is looking for $2 billion loan.
Yes, Ethiopia also is taking. Majority of the countries, they want to take the loans. Why do they want to take these loans? Countries want to develop. Number one, China also is facing challenges on the other side, that it is being challenged. So is also pulling back a little bit to focus on its economy. It doesn't want its economy also to collapse. So it leaves a gap there that these people come to exploit. The IMF, because it has been rejected, it has been shunned for a long time, and China has been the major lender on the African continent, as you have heard. So the IMF now is getting a gap to come back and lend because we need the money. That is the issue. The issue is that we need the money. Now, the question now comes, how should we now reject the IMF? The IMF, you cannot reject it as a single state. A single state does not have the power to reject the IMF. The answer to that question is what Nkrumah was saying in 1963 at the formation of the Organization of African Unity. He was saying that the unification, in all his work, Nkrumah was making the case for the unification of Africa. Why? Because when you unify Africa, you have aggregated what we mentioned, the economy of Africa. It becomes $3.5 trillion. That is the power. But if you leave the continent fragmented, then you leave the small states vulnerable. to manipulation and exploitation. But when you aggregate it, then you have $3.5 trillion. Turkey is an economy of less than $900 million, less than 1 trillion. Africa is $3.5 trillion aggregated combined. Turkey is now manufacturing its own aircraft, fighter jets, trains, cars, everything, all the major technologies. Africa is not doing that. Why? Is because the various African power is fragmented. Africa's power is fragmented, so that power is not effective. So then it leaves you vulnerable to manipulation. So that is what we are seeing in Kenya. That is what we are seeing in Ethiopia. That is what we are seeing in Ghana, that now they become beggars, the people who are rich, because they don't know how to use their wealth. So that is why Nkrumah was saying that aggregate Africa's economy, the economy of $3.5 trillion becomes capital. The resources in our ground, the cobalt, the what, it becomes infrastructure. The human resources which Africa has becomes an asset, because Africa's literacy rate right now is up to 70%. It becomes an asset. So these three things, Africa's combined GDP of 3.5 trillion, Africa's material resources in the ground, which are desired by the whole world, then Africa's population, these becomes the assets, irresistible assets. These are the assets which China used to attract the high value investment into China. So that means companies like Apple, why do you think companies like Apple are not coming to invest in Africa? Why do you think companies like Tesla are not coming to invest in Africa and open up factories, but they are going to India? Why do you think so? It's because we have not organized ourselves. So the high value investment cannot come because the economy and the market is fragmented. The security is not unified. You have a few misleaders on the continent warring against themselves and confusing the continent, and everyone is pulling in a different direction. We are not coordinated, and that is the problem, and that is what we are trying to work on, starting here with Connect Africa. Thank you very much, Mahlet. I hope I've answered the question very well.
Yeah, indeed. I think very much in detail. Yeah. So I think you also have answered. Somebody was asking, and I was thinking that question is also answered all along when you address Pigbin's question. It was, I think, Ola, brother Ola Balogun. Let me just read out what he said. Yeah, thank you for sharing your truth, Kwame. The question is, how do we get this type of conversation on the African continent? This is exactly now what Kwame told Brother Pigbin. Please share this information to your network, to you. I mean, we are doing what we can, on the platforms that we have. This kind of news, this kind of information.
And Mahlet, let me just add a little bit on that. Let me add on his question. So Mahlet has said, we are doing what we are supposed to do. For us, we are doing our part. So there's no small effort. That is what you have to understand. There's no small effort. There's no small action. Whatever you do is important as long as it's towards helping Africa regain its dignity. The African people all across the globe, we have seen African people being killed in the United States. Why? Is because of the weakness of the African continent, because of the disorganization of the African continent. So anything which you do, however small, is contributory to that effort of strengthening the African continent and bringing back the dignity of the African people. So we have started the work. So we invite you to come and participate in that effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So that's what you should do. Use it. Listen to it and take the information, jot down the notes that you want, and then you go and do your research also on a specific topic that you are interested, because in 1 hour we have covered a lot, the background, the cause, and then how it impacts Africa. But also what you can do is give it a like if you like it really, if you find it relevant, and also share it to your network. Anyone who do you think that will be interested to know, to have this information. Also, Brother Ola asked if you can talk about Kwame a little more on Japan, on how Japan economy was killed by the USA in the 70s and 80s. But another one, CNS commented, you can go and look an agreement referred to as Plaza Accord. I mean, for us, we have been here for 1 hour and 15 minutes. So I don't know if Kwame wants to comment on that, but I think it has been answered. You can refer to that, but of course I'm not Kwame. Kwame can decide on that. But I have my updates for my side. I'm dying to say this, like the words are going to fly out of my mouth. Earlier, when Kwame was analyzing regarding what Africa should do, of course, how it impacts Africa and what it should do to use the gold as a currency, and then I interjected and said that I've just read today that Zimbabwe started to use gold as a currency. Now, just 1 hour, 2 hours before, actually, a news came up, of course, saying that the IMF warns against a gold-backed digital currency. This is directed. This is what they did. We just told you. We just analyzed this. What did we say? How Saddam Hussein was killed. How Gaddafi was killed. This is it. Yeah, Kwame. I just can't believe you. You may take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So the issue of Japan, of course, it was economic issue, as we know that the United States doesn't want to be overtaken, and the Western world majorly doesn't want to be overtaken. And for a very long time, the United States has been the flag bearer of the Western world, of European culture. That is why you see when they are talking about, they say our way of life, our values. So that means the imposition of European values on the rest of the world, engineering, social engineering. That is why I normally laugh even at people who say, people like Museveni, for example, he may have ideas, he may have his convictions, but if you say that we should leave Africa to move at snail pace, evolutionary, we should leave Africa's position, whether economic, Africa's process of integration to be evolutionary, it takes away the fact that in the West, they are not leaving their aggression to be evolutionary. Their aggression is revolutionary. Their social engineering of society, for example, you see how they are pushing homosexuality, pushing their values, pushing their neoliberal doctrine so that they can exploit our resources and continue to be rich. They push this in a revolutionary manner. So Europe has been like this for a very long time. And America, they are descendants of Europe. Canada, they are descendants of Europe. Australia, New Zealand, they are descendants of Europe. That is why you see they work together. They work together and they don't give excuses about how they are different in languages. Mm-hmm. These things, you only find it in Africa, where people are greedy. Certain group of people, I'm not saying all Africans, but certain wicked leaders who are greedy, they rationalize when you are talking about Africans working together to advance their interests on the international stage. So the United States has maintained that position of protecting European values, that it never wanted Japan to overtake it, because Japan came to the United States after World War II, copied the technology, duplicated things like fridges, washing machines. As you see that for a long time, we had the things which were made in Japan, radios, TVs, Sony, Hitachi, you see, all these, LG, they happened in Japan. Japan was the manufacturing center of the world before China came onto the scene. But Japan copied that technology, majority of it, whether it is vehicles. Toyota came after Ford and Chrysler and General Motors and all those cars which were being manufactured. So when Japan started manufacturing and flooding the American markets and became very rich, then it became a threat because it was the second biggest economy during that time, and the United States saw it as a threat. So when it saw it as a threat, then it started demonizing Japanese products, started demonizing Japan and attacking Japanese economy until Japan was pushed down and manipulating everything until Japan was pushed down. That's what also you are seeing today with China, like I mentioned. So that is the answer to your question.
Yeah. Thank you, Kwame. I thought you were going to continue on IMF warning the digital, the gold-backed digital currency anyway. But yeah, I think it's 1 hour and 20 minutes. Let's call it a day. Thank you very much, our viewers, for your, consistency and engagement and all your comments and questions. It all means a lot for us. It keeps us going. For those of you who want to support us, I just shared our PayPal account. So please, you can go and donate. Of course, if you like it, if you like what we do, and that will help us for us to be here more frequently, because a lot is happening and sometimes we really can't even select what is best, because we find everything should be analyzed, because there is always a story, a behind story, that the way to look at from the African perspective. So yeah, it will help us for us to do more, to be here more, to bring you live discussions at Connect Africa. Other than that, thank you very much. Thank you, Kwame, as usual, really. And have a good evening. Myself and Kwame will see you again on Tuesday. But of course, there are some other videos that we are going to release in between. But yeah, Kwame will join us again on Tuesday. Until next time, have a good evening, have a good weekend, and bye-bye. Thank you.